Hello and welcome to Colette and Matt have entered the chat, a show about the most important issue of our time, an issue that 4 out of 5 dentists will agree is the most important topic in human civilization. That's right, it's video games, and honestly, that fifth dentist, he or she
can he just fuck right off? Is that what we're trying to say? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Off.
I don't know though. If I asked my dentist, I think he would. I don't know if he. I think he would be like, video games. That's cool, but I don't think he would like. I think he would disagree. So
he would say cavities.
Yeah, and
sugar.
I'd be like, you're a wonderful man, but we got to do something about your priorities, man.
Priority.
really, we gotta.
You're hearing the voice of Colette Bennett. My name is Matt Silverman. We are here as usual in your ears to talk about video games. How are you, Colette?
I am very well, thank you. I am, as I was saying a few minutes before we started, kind of reeling because the CDC just announced that if you're vaccinated, you can more or less go back to normal life. And I'm just kind of like, what?
We were chatting a little bit, of course, before the show, but like, it's such fantastic news, but it also feels like, okay, like I need to understand the science that is leading what appears to be a very cautious and conservative CDC. Biden's CDC seems to be like, we're just making sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted before we give recommendations. And so for a super cautious government organization to say, okay, we're all good here, that is incredible news, but I also want to understand it before. Yeah,
I do not trust. My inner Fox Mulder is like screaming about aliens. I'm like, ever since 1996, there's been like a little Fox Mulder that lives in my heart. And he's like, trust no one, trust no one.
The older I get, the less... The more I tip toward like, I really distrust corporations and like, the
doctors,
last 4 years.
Don't even get me started on doctors.
Well, sure. But like the last 4 years notwithstanding, like I can get on board with most governments. Like, they're not great and they're not always looking out for your best interest, but like their purpose in the universe is to like, at least a democratic government, is to make policies to protect people. So like, if I'm going to choose between trusting, Mark Zuckerberg or Joe Biden CDC, like I'm going to trust the government org more,
right?
If I have to, you know what I mean? So it's good news. Yeah,
being a human is hard on the whole, but I think it's extremely challenging right now. We're like, we can breathe outside? It's okay. I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, I'll process that when we're not talking about the most important topic.
Yeah, I don't know why why are we on this topic? Because we have important business to discuss here today.
I was momentarily distracted. And then I remembered the truth, which is that this is really the only thing that's worth talking about.
In the words of that Y-Wing pilot who got destroyed in the Battle of Yavin, stay on target is what I have to say to you. His name escapes me. I'm sorry, everyone.
That's fabulously nerdy.
Please let us know. We know you know. Tweet at us. So we have an interesting episode idea today. We typically chat about what we are currently playing, but we are thinking about other ways to get into the cultural prism of games that came before, games that are coming in the future, games that are happening now that are connected to the past and the future. A cultural spectrum, a timeline here. And you, Colette, actually thought of this topic, which is
games we loved that don't hold up for whatever those reasons may be. Does this mean that like you loved a game once and now that game sucks? Not necessarily. I don't think it's quite as black and white as that. But, one of the first thoughts that came to mind when I thought of this topic was that around 2008, I think that was the year that Puzzle Quest came out. I remember laying on my sofa and like working and then like finishing work and like gluing myself to like the L-shaped part of my sofa and playing Puzzle Quest for like 5 hours in this just bliss state of like, oh my God, it's like an RPG, but it's mixed with match 3, and when you match 3, you fight stuff, and holy crap, like I was just so fascinated and amazed by that game, and I loved it, like, played it 40, 50 hours, right? And so like I feel like in our current gaming culture, we're seeing so many classic games be remade, and it's really nice to see the remakes. For the most part, I think they're really, really good. Like Final Fantasy VII remake has been like a thrill for me in every way so far. But I saw Puzzle Quest get remastered recently, and it was on the Switch shop for like, I don't know, like $10 or something. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to play it again. This is going to be so great. And I started playing it, and I was like, this is boring. And then I was like, oh my God. And that made me sad, I guess, because I feel like despite the fact that we inevitably change as humans over and over and over and over until we no longer exist, for whatever reason, I was expecting that if I loved this thing, that I would love it for the rest of my life. And it's
that's my first question. Did you change? Did games change? What's going on today that is different from that first time that you really fell in love with it?
Well, I would wager to say that I changed is the big move, right? Like we all changed.
But this is only 2008, which, doesn't seem that long ago.
Oh my God, but it was
a long time ago.
It was. And it's crazy, right? Because it's like, a perfect snapshot would probably be, which I didn't do before the show, to pull up other games that came out in 2009. And then your brain would probably go, or rather 2008. And then your brain would go, oh, yeah. Right. Oh, gosh, that is really dated. Like when I was doing my Silent Hill 2 replay, I was like, this is 20 years old. 20 years.
Here's what gets me. Why does my brain always think about the 90s as 20 years ago? Because it ain't anymore. I mean, this is, when your old aunts and uncles and grandparents get together and they just sit around the table and like the main topic of conversation is like what medications everyone's on. That's, I feel like I'm there, but talking about media.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think it's kind of an inevitability of like growing older that like people tend to be like, oh, things were better then, sometimes, rather than, oh, things are good now, or like what's good now. And I think like for us, media, it's so different because especially with the arc of games, I feel like we've just seen games blossom, going from like the beginnings you and I had, like for me, NES and Atari, like into what games are now. I mean, this is stuff I dreamed about as a young person. I mean, like I kid you not, I have this one specific memory of going to some store with my parents, picking up a magazine, a PC Gamer magazine, and opening it and seeing a screenshot from the LucasArts game Loom. I don't know if you're familiar with Loom.
Yes,
but I remember.
I don't think I played it, but I'm aware of it. Yes.
Well, I didn't either, but I can tell you that I remember clear as day, however many years later it is, that I stared at this screenshot of Loom in this magazine, and I, with an aching heart, thought, I would do anything to have a computer powerful enough to play this game.
Yes.
And like now you could probably literally play it like on a postage stamp. Like it is, but you know what I'm saying? Like that was so beautiful to me at that time.
Yeah,
so
the
I think
technological acceleration. We mentioned it maybe on our first episode, how young this medium is. And I just freaking love putting screenshots of fucking Pong next to screenshots of, whatever. Monster Hunter, Star Citizen, whatever, amazing graphical game, Resident Evil. And that's less than a human lifetime.
Yeah.
That's how far we met. So just think about 20 years from now. It's inconceivable.
I can't. It's inconceivable. Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like, oh, there's no way. And then another thought that occurs to me, Pong was that released in the 80s?
Late. I mean, if you really want to go back to like I forget the inventor, playing Pong on an oscilloscope, a scientific instrument that displays light readouts, and then someone hacked it together to play a game, a 2-player, turning knobs game, which then got co-opted by Atari or some. I'm hazy on. I did a little research on this a while back, but basically, like the guy who it was the Magnavox Odyssey or something.
Right.
Some company was like, "That's cool. We're going to make our version," and then Pong became a hit with Atari, and then video games happened, then they crashed, and then a gentleman by the name of Miyamoto, who you may know, was like, how about this Mario guy? How about this Link guy? And then it was like, holy shit, these are what video games actually could be. Here we go.
What I was thinking about that, the reason I was like, when did it happen, is because that made me realize that if that first model of what would become Pong was like in the late 70s, we're dealing with just over 50 years of game.
Yep.
That's not that long.
Not long at all.
And it's crazy, you know, because it's like it's lucky, right, for us that we get to see that in our lifetime. I think because
it really is. Yeah.
You know, I mean, my God, I can't even, like you said, I can't even imagine in 10 years what it'll be. So we get to be alive during this time of, like, you know, video games, which brings me back to the point of why they're the most important topic on Earth.
100%. Are we, this is I love this question that you just that you alluded to just here, which is, are we lucky or are we going to miss it? Meaning there's some phrase that's like, I'm too old. I was born in a time. I was born too late to explore the world. Like the world is always has been explored and mapped completely, but I'm born too soon to explore the stars. Meaning we're in this place where we will never. Our generation and hundreds of generations before and after us will kind of be in this middle ground between the next phase of humanity, and that's a very highfalutin analogy. But with video games, it's like, yes, we are seeing the jump from, like, you know, calculators to VR, but like we're just getting started and we will never get to see the holodeck. And are we missing it? I don't know. I like this stuff.
Those are some really good questions, but I tell you what, I will say this much without knowing what, you know, comes in that long future where I will not be. I feel like what I have had in this timeline has given me so much joy and happiness that I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that.
That is the correct answer. Thank you for bringing me back to Earth, because why does my head go like, I'll never live to see the good stuff, and you're like, I'm having fun, and I'm like, that's not the point. This is not about fun.
Being in the moment is really hard. Like, you know, everyone, like, you know, you can literally like go to Marshall's right now and there'll be like 27 framed hand lettered pictures that say live in the moment. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? To me, living in the moment is literally a thing that like is really hard to get to happen, you know, but like in those moments where, you know, I'm sitting here kind of reflecting on games that didn't hold up for me, and then also the entire journey for me, I'm kind of like, you know what? This has been pretty rad. Like, so, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with your perspective either. I just think that being in the moment is just tough.
But listeners, take Colette's advice. If you're having fun, that's all there is. So, puzzle. So I'm not really familiar with Puzzle Quest. It's 2008. Is this on like a DS or something? What's going on?
I played it. Oh my God. You actually made me think about the first thing I played it on. I think I played it on the Xbox 360.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right in my muddled memory. But yeah, I think I played it on the 360, and then the game was such a massive success that it also went to like every other possible like thing that you can imagine it going to. It was like, oh my God, Puzzle Quest, like, because it was like, oh, it's this mashup. And like, you know, if I think about it, I think that maybe Puzzle Quest might have helped to set the tone for other mashups. Like, you know, when Chelsea was talking about like, oh, I'm playing this game and it's, you know, a mashup of like a dating sim and what was the number game she was mentioning?
It was Murder by Numbers. It was right. Like the relationship building, but then it was not Sudoku. What is it? Picross.
Yeah, Picross. That's right. And I was like, wow, like what an amazing, you know, morph. But at the same time, like, I think maybe part of what I loved about Puzzle Quest then, regardless of if it doesn't hold up for me today where I am, I still am fascinated by the idea of morphing two genres in a way that you really haven't seen done very often or ever. So to me, I'm like, Picross dating sim? What the fuck? Give it to me.
And so it sounds like, well, tell me the basic mechanics of it, because again, very unfamiliar. It's an RPG, but instead of monster battles or whatever. It's some sort of puzzle system that lets you progress.
So you know what Bejeweled is, right?
Sure.
Okay. So in the game, you start this great quest and think of a very straightforward, like RPG adventure, like medieval garb. You know, you have to fight orcs and, you know, and knights and whatever, right? Like very medieval. And so you get a quest and you're like, oh, neat. I go get my quest and then I go to the city and oh my God, like I have to fight orcs on the way. And so when you get into the fight with the orc, you change into a screen where you basically have Bejeweled in the middle of the screen and you're on the left and your opponent is on the right. And as you're matching, and you know, just any match 3 game has like, you can match 3, you can match 4, you can match 5, you can match special objects, you can match this thing and it turns into a bomb. Like it has all that, but each thing you match will like be an attack against, or if you save up enough of a certain color, you cast a spell. So that was basically the entire game.
It's funny when you say puzzle, my brain goes to number sequences or fill in the blank or whatever, you know, or environmental puzzle. I know that Tetris and Bejeweled and Puyo Puyo, those are inherently puzzles, but they're so action oriented. They're so quick. They're not, I don't view them as like, let me sit down and figure this puzzle out. I view it as like, oh, move this here, oh, move this here, here we go. And that it's arcadey. There's an arcade action happening there within the puzzle structure. So I didn't realize this game was that. That also makes it more appealing. I'm not a big Tetris person, but that appeals to me more than a Sudoku kind of situation, you know? Yeah,
well, and here's another thing that might appeal to you. I looked up the date of the release on my phone because I was fascinated and wondered when it was. It was actually 2007. And what I quickly found out after that is that D3, the same publisher that put out the original Puzzle Quest, did a Magic Puzzle Quest. So it's all Magic the Gathering, but Puzzle Quest style. And it's on your phone and it's free. So that's something that might be worth checking out. I will be checking it out after we are done.
There you go. Okay. There's actually 2 adjacent questions that come to my mind. One I was going to ask you, which is if Puzzle Quest was so popular and going to every platform, did it ever become a franchise? And maybe they licensed it to Magic. And then adjacent question, which we don't necessarily have to get into, but like, why the hell did it take Magic so long to come to video game platforms? Why isn't Magic the Gathering a big time video game franchise?
You know, that's a really good question, and I will get to that. But to address the first part, Puzzle Quest was successful enough for them to try to make it into a franchise. And what they did, which I really admired and a lot of other gamers didn't like, is that for the second game, they decided to change the setting. And so they decided to make the setting of Puzzle Quest 2 space.
I was just going to say like cyberpunk.
Right. Like they were like, we need something new. So in 2010, they put out Puzzle Quest 2, and Puzzle Quest 2 was, I can't remember if it was the same developers. I know it was the same publishers or not. I think maybe it might have been a different developer, but at any rate, oh my gosh, it's all coming back to me now. Okay. So 2009 it was called Galactrix, and that was the one in space. And I thought they did a really good job, but a lot of people, for whatever reason, didn't like it. Like,
why did they name it? Was it like Puzzle Quest : Galactric, or they just totally rebranded? Okay.
No, it was Puzzle Quest Galactrix. Yeah.
Got it.
And I mean, it really was the same basic concept, but you know, of course, everything was space themed. And I remember liking that one too, but a lot of other people didn't like that one. I don't know why, really. And so then they were like, oh no, we fucked up. And so then they brought back Puzzle Quest 2, which was like the original. I believe there was a Puzzle Quest 3. I never played that. They licensed it out to Marvel. So there was a Marvel Puzzle Quest. Wow, and now I know that there is also a Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest.
So like by all accounts, this is a successful, and I don't know if the word beloved is applicable, but like they're making them. Clearly, people are buying them and playing them. This is a successful franchise. Yeah. So what's going on with you? Why are you not feeling it anymore?
Well, there's a couple things I think of. Number one, I'm like, okay, this was 2007. So we're now looking at what, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. It's almost 15 years old, actually. So I'm like, okay, number one, it's probably like, I enjoyed it then because of where I was at in my life at that time, and also as a gamer, right? Like I wanted a certain kind of thing. And maybe now I've played tons of dupes that story-based games that use match 3 is like the fighting, the thing that makes you fight or whatever. They're all over the App Store, actually. So like maybe I've just seen it done a lot better since. I don't think it necessarily means that Puzzle Quest was a bad game to begin with and that I enjoyed it at the time. Because like if you go look at the ratings for the first game, they're quite high. I think it's just a matter of perhaps I still love hybrid games and I still love puzzle games and I still love RPGs. So mostly I think I would attribute it to having seen that original concept that they came up with made a lot better by people who came after them.
Yes. So this is getting at the core discussion of today's episode, which is looking at old games through two lenses. One, as a piece of media or art of its time, and acknowledging that it cannot be better than it is because the art form had not evolved enough to or that we're spoiled, that we cannot go back to that time because we now know that this was a good idea, but it's been made better by so many other people. And then there's another version of like where you do go back and look at it and you're like, oh no, this is just trash. And it's objectively bad because other games of its time were still better than other comparable games were still better at the same time. And it's not about ranking what's better, what's worse, but it's more about like, I think about this all the time of like with any media, but especially games, like I tend to seek out very complicated, deep games. I want them to fill my whole brain. I want to end up on a wiki. I want to be reading about them. I want to be watching about them. And then a little great little game comes along from the past, or perhaps even from the now, and it's good, but it's simple. It's straightforward. And my brain's like, my big brain is too evolved for this simple little thing. And that is like, I don't know. Are the great crazy games of the 21st century ruining our ability to enjoy or appreciate other things?
Well, you see, that's so interesting because you saying that makes me go, okay, but I just talked a few episodes ago about how I cannot resist going to play the original Legend of Zelda every year. But my God, clearly that game has been elevated. I mean, Breath of the Wild is in my opinion, the perfect Zelda game, right?
Yeah.
So why would I want to go back and play the dinky NES version of The Legend of Zelda? I guess it's nostalgia. I don't know. To be honest, though, if I try to take off like my retro goggles, which is hard, I still think that core game is an incredibly great game.
It is.
Yeah.
It is that. So in a world where we look back at old games and say, wow, these are good ideas that later became amazing experiences. And back then we didn't know any better, but today we look back and say, wow, what a cool thing. But then you look back at The Legend of Zelda, or you look back at Super Mario Brothers NES, and you step back and you say, holy shit, these are games that were so ahead of their time, so good that you can play them in 2021 and have a great time. That is what we call this is the Shakespeare of video game. We can go back and read Shakespeare and say, damn, this was written in 16 whatever, and it's giving me feelings. And you can go back and play Super Mario Brothers and be like, how does this game have physics? Mario has weight. He's sliding around. The enemies are cool. There's reactive environments. How did this exist in 1980?
Well, see,
85?
That's a perfect point because when I thought about this, the thing that came up the most for me is that I am a game player, but I am not a game designer, and I am not. I don't have that type of spatial thinking that, for instance, is like, okay, like, I can write a book, fine, but like, I can't I can't create a game from the perspective of like, oh, well, these would be things that would make for infinitely good playability.
Yeah.
I can enjoy those things, but I don't have that kind of thinking specifically about games.
Isn't it
right?
weird how we can identify and appreciate when it's working and what is good and what is not, but for some reason cannot conceptualize how to make it? I am exactly with you on that.
Right. And so to me, what I see is that when I look back at like the original Mario Brothers, the original Zelda, Contra, like games that we were like, wow, I think the reason that we go back to play those games is not just because of the nostalgia of them, but because those games hold up because they are brilliant on many different levels. They are brilliant in terms of design. They are brilliant in terms of like, I feel like when I play those games, there's things happening that the designers understand that I will never understand. I'll just know that I love it. And that's it. But as a game designer, I'm sure a game designer would have some great thoughts about, oh, well, part of the reason that, you have this reaction to this game is because, the designers did this and this fits into this. And that's part of the reason why, like when I look at Hades, I'm like, I know that part of the dynamic of that game was to make dying feel like
progress.
Yeah, like progress, like I'd die, but instead of being like crestfallen, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it again. And I was like, if I do it one more, and I recall the thoughts I had playing that game. It was stuff like, oh, well, if I go back this time and I do this, then I could maybe use like the gun in this scene, and then maybe that would get me past that level. And then like even when I got to the final boss and beat it, it was like, oh, well, maybe if I can do that again and then I do this, maybe I'll be able to unlock this part. So for whatever reason, it was kind of like the donkey and the carrot,
Yes.
So I recognize that as good game design, but I don't understand how the designers, know how to make that. That's just not my creative forte, right?
Because there is a feeling, there's an intangible feeling,
right,
of wanting to get the carrot, and the mystery of that, to me and to us, as you're saying, is if the reward for dying and starting over, I forget what it is in Hades, it's like a darkness or it's a gem or something that you
darkness.
slowly use to upgrade health or defense or whatever it is. If those rewards were too high, you'd feel like you were blasting through it. And if they were not high enough, you'd feel frustrated. So there is a elasticity, a push and pull, a feeling that I cannot express in words, but a game developer somehow through
understands that language,
either understands or just puts it together and is just like, wow, this is not working at all. Let's play it through 100 more times until we feel the feeling correctly. And I know, if you read a manuscript 100 times, if you listen to your own voice or song or video 100 times, you start looking at it and you're either you lose the ability to judge if it's good or not.
Yep.
So I don't know how a game developer can build a game, kick the tires on it at every stage over and over and over again, and come out the other end and be like, yep, it's ready. How do you know? How can you know?
But here's the thing. When I'm writing a book or a story, I might be writing it and then I go back and read it and then I go, oh, that doesn't work. This has to go here. Oh, I need to move this section up here. How do I know that? No one taught me how to do that. I just, I guess technically you could say, oh, well, you read, thousands and thousands of books over the course of your life, so you get the rhythm. But every book has a different rhythm. Like, how do I know that? And then, I think about the way that, for instance, like you produce and envision things. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you know how to perfectly edit like a free dad video? You just know.
It is, I think about this a lot, as you know. It comes back to what you said earlier, which I would summarize as, in one word, taste. It's like, you know what's good and you know what's bad. And then you do your very best to make a thing that you hope to be good. And then you come back to it and say, and then you feel, yeah, okay, this aligns with my view of what it should be or what is good. Or you come back to it and you say, God damn it, this thing that I put 17 hours into is total trash and it needs to go in the garbage immediately. Mm-hmm. And there is a taste that creators have developed over their lifetime of consuming media. And then I think there's also just experience making stuff of like, sometimes you're writing and it's flowing out of you and you know it's good. And sometimes you're writing and you're just like, goodbye. I have to put this away for perhaps a long time and come back to it much later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, and this is such a big topic, right? Like this particular thing I'm about to say could fill up a whole podcast and more. Yeah. But I think that, really the big thing that changes, I mean, of course, games get dated, like we briefly talked about how, like games that were like heavy RPG grind games are like, yeah, God, we can't go back and do that now. It just feels so, repetitive and just old, right? It's archaic. Mm-hmm. But the big piece, I think, is perception. And that literally goes for every single thing that happens in your life. I mean, a perfect example was, you going, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I'll never get to play. And me going, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that I got to play all these things. This is not to make you sound like an ungrateful asshole, by the way, because you're not. But like, all that is a perception difference, right? Perception. And like, 100%. A friend of mine, last week, I guess, a fellow streamer, he was playing an old PlayStation 1 game called The Legend of Dragoon that I really, really liked when it was around the time I played Final Fantasy VII. Legend of Dragoon also had pre-rendered backgrounds and they were very pretty, just like Final Fantasy VII's were. And it kind of had like a Final Fantasy VII clone feeling to it, But I liked it because I needed that itch scratched at the time. And so he was playing it. It's his favorite game of all time. And I was like, did it hold up for you? And he was like, honestly, yeah, it did. And I was watching him play going, this is not holding up for me. Once again, not because it's a garbage game, but really, I think it's just a matter of perception. Some people love to go back to games that have a grind that we find abysmal because they find comfort in the repetitiveness of that grind for some reason.
Yes.
So,
I mean, this is so obvious, but everything is subjective. So, yeah, I think a lot about this, and then especially, I get bummed out about subjectivity because of #capitalism, because you might love something and it might be the most meaningful thing in your life ever. And if it doesn't make money, it's not going to continue existing. It's very unlikely that it will keep going or have a sequel or, talk about a streamer or whatever, that they may not be able to continue because of the connection between capitalism and art.
Yeah.
And so we get hung up about subjectivity because we need to give things a score and we need to say things are good or bad, or this is worth your money or it's not worth your money. Mm-hmm. And that is a sad state of affairs for any art form or media form.
Yeah. Like, I honestly think that I was just about to say something about how when I was working at video game outlets, that there was always, and still to this day, is such an uproar over the way games are rated on reviews. And I kind of get why. I think that honestly, Metacritic has the best system because it's better to make an aggregate of reviews, I think, of many, many hundreds and hundreds of reviews than it is to trust one reviewer who, no matter how professional of a journalist you are, it's still only your perception and your opinion.
But you said this earlier, you do really need to find the reviewer or personality that you jive with and also trust. The T word is important. And then it's like that person can say, this is good and this is bad and whatever, but there's one part in here that, I thought was great. And you're like, yes, I know that I will like that too. So it's a go for me.
Yeah.
I tend to do that often.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, like for me, for instance, I don't have any reviewer that I'm so aligned with that I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm going to love what they love. I have a friend that loves almost the same things I love. And so we might tell each other.
That's exactly,
right.
That's
like,
the same thing.
You're going to love this, or, you'll, and yes, like that person's usually right. But for the most part, I personally love my favorite model that I go to the most frequently for ratings is Steam. I love Steam's
Yes.
aggregation of reviews.
Yes.
And you're not just going to get a couple hundred, you're going to get thousands.
Yes.
And that works for me.
It works for me as well, because it's not numbers. In aggregate, it is numbers, but it is. I'm looking for for 5 people to say this or that, but I really loved the the combat system. And I'll be like, yeah, okay, good. That 5 people in the reviews confirming what I hoped to know about this game is enough for me to make an informed decision. I think it's great.
Yeah. No,
so
I agree.
Puzzle Quest, you played the remake. So it was just boring. Like, where did you land on it in terms of like, hey, this is not working for me?
I don't know if boring is the right word. I wasn't getting the same that absolute rapt interest was just not there this time. And I was like, that sucks. And I was disappointed because what I really wanted to have that and to relive it, and I think that particular experience and some of the other ones I'll mention as well in this show, I couldn't duplicate the experience. It was a matter of being where I was at the time playing that thing. However, I will quickly digress from the main part of the topic and say that when I looked up the date of the original release of Puzzle Quest, I found out that they're actually reviving the series and releasing a third revamped Puzzle Quest this year. Wild.
A new game, not a remake, but a fresh
brand new game
in this franchise.
And I'm like, maybe that one will be exciting for me the way the original one was. So that's something that I really look forward to. And I think it's okay, right? Like, it's disappointing in one way, but it's also okay in another way that game was that thing to you at that time and now it's not. That's okay.
It is very much okay. And it's also reminding me, where you're talking about a new game with the core mechanics of the game you loved, but with modern sensibilities. Reminder bell going off. Games are a living medium. They evolve with us culturally and with our brains, etc. And so I love that. Even games that games that become updated, like movies, with rare exceptions, do not get updated with they do not incorporate fan feedback. You know what I mean?
Right,
they do not incorporate viewer feedback, which is why when Sonic the Hedgehog, not referencing it as a video game movie, but as a moment in time where they release these trailers with a beloved character, and the entire internet, the entire globe, every single man, woman, and child on planet Earth said, "No way. That is not what Sonic the Hedgehog looks like." And they changed it. They went back and changed the movie.
I mean, they weren't wrong. That's definitely not what he looked like.
But that's to my knowledge, that's never happened. And it wasn't just like, oh, this weird scene or this one actor or something. They reanimated the whole goddamn movie. That's unbelievable.
It is, but
that happens in games all the time. That happens in games all the time.
Well, and that's a perfect example of games culture getting to a size and a point where it's influencing film culture, I think. Because it's like, I honestly think that on one hand, gamers can become way too entitled knowing they have that power. But on the other hand, I feel like as a developer, if I was a developer and I was hearing from a massive amount of people that's not right, I too would be like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I need to consider that. If that many people feel that strongly, should you not consider, well, this could make my product more sellable? I mean, just from a revenue standpoint, no other standpoint.
And we were talking earlier of like, how does a developer play their own game 1,000 times to know if it's good? And I assume developers would say we do that, but also like we let lots of other people play it thousands of times, and then we incorporate the prevailing feedback. I mean, that is, this happens with all commercial art, of course. But yeah, I love the culture of games that allows that to happen in public through early access out loud on the internet, because most other media, again, you close the door and you bring a focus group in, and a select handful of people who sign NDAs can consume your media and tell you what's good or bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the internet, we can all decide, you can all work together to make a game that you like or that you think has potential the best it can be. Mm-hmm. That's just the internet, the whole promise of the internet coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. To serve this particular medium, I hope it is serving other art forms, maybe governments or medicine. Yeah. I think we can leverage these systems for other things, I hope.
Yeah.
Things less important.
Things
less
people.
Important than video games,
yeah.
Like medicine or government. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's okay.
On my list here is not a single game, but there are two trajectories for my gaming youth. One is Nintendo, of course, as it is for most people, and the other is PC games, like adventure games, mostly from Sierra Online in the early 90s, because we've talked about it a little bit. These are stories, these are characters, these are narratives that just did not exist in arcades or in home consoles. They only existed in the PC world. Mm-hmm. And King's Quest, Space Quest, Quest for Glory, I love. And actually, I'll set Quest for Glory on the side because I actually think those hold up way, way better. But early King's Quest type games are so damn obtuse.
Really?
So they are essentially narrative puzzle games, but it's not like, oh, I found a key and then the key goes in the lock. It's like, I found an apple, and if you open the apple, it has a worm, and the worm gives you a secret scroll that tells you to go to the castle, but the castle's actually a ship. And it's like, it actually makes zero sense when you put it together. And what these games were just typing in every goddamn thing you could think of. Until you somehow either stumbled upon the correct answer, because there wasn't really choice. It was like, there is a correct answer to find, and you type until you find it, or you buy the fucking hint guide or whatever. Right. And these games were so influential and so important to me, but in that specific obtuseness category, they do not hold up until the later series, like the later ones, the 4s, the 5s, the sequels start to become a little more intuitive because graphics got better and narrative design got better. And so we learned from those mistakes. Not me, but the developers learned how to make better art because it gets better over time. But I mean, Jesus, play King's Quest 1 or 2 and let me know how that goes. If you know all the answers, I think you just type, and the game is done because you're just going through a sequence of events. But yeah, so I am a little disappointed that those games that are so important to me really don't stand the test of time. Yeah. They're still beautiful. The characters are still special. But historically, they are so important.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And in regards to the obtuseness, when I thought about games that I also like one game that I think I can't remember if we've mentioned this on the podcast or not, but one game that always comes to mind for me with obtuseness when I think about it is Castlevania 2, a game that I played a lot. And I was so confused as, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. So I was a child, but I was also really confused by certain things about that game that okay, I don't know if you've played Castlevania 2, but in Castlevania 2, when you go to the towns, some of the townspeople lie to you, which to me is genius, right? If it's couched in the right. So let's just say you're playing a modern RPG, you're playing, whatever, Mass Effect 15, and you get to a planet or whatever, and you get there, and how they would couch it now would be you get there, you talk to the guy at the door, the guy would be like, welcome to, Bloomeria or wherever you are, and then And then like you'd probably be like, well, let me talk to everybody. So you talk to a few people and you talk to a random NPC who would say, don't trust everything you hear here. That's your cue, right? Like, oh, some people might lie to me. But, NES in the 80s definitely didn't have cues like that. So as a result, as a 9-year-old, I'm like wandering around, like, getting a hint from somebody and then pursuing it for like hours. And it's a lie. And I'm like, I almost feel like the creators were literally just like cackling to themselves, like, we're going to fuck these kids up. We're going to make them wander around for hours lost. Or
it's like, hey, how could we make our world more interesting, realistic, but without the context is that you're going to mislead people. Benefit of the doubt. We don't have to look this up, but like maybe was there something in a manual or somewhere that perhaps you missed as a kid?
Number one, no, because this is something that has plagued me enough to where I have literally looked in the manual.
You looked it up.
Yeah. Like I think if you subscribed to Nintendo Power at that time, they probably did a guide and maybe in there they said, don't trust, but I mean, that's not built into my game, right? But to that note, a lot of games in the NES era are actually pretty obtuse when it comes to puzzles and explanations and direction and stuff like that. And I mean, I really can't criticize the fact that they were, because I feel like that was so early in the genesis of video game development. Now, if I play a game today and I don't know where the fuck I am or what I'm doing, or there's no map, I'm going to be like, this is bullshit. Yeah. I'm going to stop playing that game.
Because we have 500,000 other games to play, but when you're an 8-year-old kid, you have nothing else to do or play because this is the coolest video game that is around that you got for Christmas or whatever. And I'm really fascinated by that, where we just banging our heads against the walls of puzzles or bosses or whatever was all we had. And I'm really not saying it in a back in my day, we worked hard to beat the like. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it in more of a game design way of like, we didn't know any better, and devs, there was only so much room on the cartridge. So like doing the same thing over and over and over again was all there was on this cartridge to play.
Yeah. Speaking of that, for those who really do like kind of gazing back into that time period and learning about what it took to make some of these games, the gaming historian on YouTube is number one, a lovely human being. Number two, does such a nice job of making like entire episodes that are well researched and well developed about the history of these games. I don't know if he's done Castlevania 2. I think maybe he hasn't, but like, it's just, I just thought, I would love to hear like an entire episode about Castlevania 2, because maybe that would make me go, oh, that's why they did that. Well, that actually was kind of clever, or like whatever, just things that it's context that you don't really know.
Correct.
How, how it was created.
We must reach out to him and bring him on, because I'm a huge fan.
I would love that.
His Tetris documentary is like, it should be on PBS. Like, these are so well done. And I believe he's done Mega Man. And I love the ones. There's some random ass peripheral for Game Boy in the 90s that was only released in Japan that actually could track fish. It was some sort of sonar device that you would throw into the water, and then it fed data back to the Game Boy, and the screen on the Game Boy would show you where the fish were, and you could fish with a Game Boy, real fishing. And no one's ever heard of this. And he did an entire piece on like why this was such a wacky product for a Japanese audience that never caught on anywhere, and is now in the annals of weird video game peripheral history. The Gaming Historian on YouTube, if you're not familiar, you must subscribe. And I support him on Patreon too. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, he's awesome. So awesome. That would be a great idea to have him on, that is.
All right, I'm writing it down. You have other games here that, don't necessarily stand the test of time for you.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting, right? I don't want to spend too long on this one, but Myst is a game that I absolutely loved, and that I have been listening to the soundtracks of Myst and Riven now for 20 some odd years. Like there's something very soothing about them to me.
Is that like CD like recorded audio, or is it a not chip tune, but like is it synthesized audio? I don't remember.
No, it's literally exactly the music that you hear in the game. Okay. And it's kind of an interesting bit, but brothers Robin and Rand Miller were the two that were behind the making of Myst, and Robin actually is the creator of the soundtracks for Myst and Riven. I do not know for sure whether or not he composed the later game soundtracks or not, but I know he did these two because they have been like something that I go back to when I just need to be in that place, if that makes sense. Like I love being in Myst. That said, what I discovered later in life when I finally revisited Myst, remade and remastered, and then recently it came out in VR, and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to be in Myst in VR. Right. That's so cool.
Oh my god.
What I learned going back, first of all, let me say this about Myst. I thought that the puzzles were really confusing because when I was playing them, I was probably 16, and I don't think I had a computer at that point. I think I might have had a hint guide, but I remember that I couldn't finish the game without the hint guide. So I bought the Prima Games hint guide or whatever. But when I went back to play it later, I thought, oh, as good as this is, being here, being on Myst Island and in the other islands that are in the game is the thing that I like the most.
Yeah.
I didn't love solving the puzzles anywhere near as much as I just like being in Myst. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I was a little disappointed because I wanted to hang out there for a longer period of time. But I was like, you know what? That's okay. I don't have to do that right now. I can do it later. Or I could never go do it. And that's fine too. So I'm not ever going to say, ooh, Myst doesn't hold up. I think for me, it was more a matter of going, oh, I learned that way back then, what I really wanted to do was just be in that space that place that they created.
I feel a little tragedy, a little sadness about this for you because it's a special place that you enjoy being in, but the obtuseness and puzzliness of the game itself potentially blocks you or prevents you from enjoying the world. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me if that is accurate or not.
To a degree. I mean, the other thing is that I have to admit that, it could very much be that the day I went to go replay that, I was like, I don't feel like doing these puzzles right now. That's totally possible. But I also remember as a teenager playing it and being like, that puzzle's fucking crazy. Like looking up the answer and going, how in the hell would anybody?
How could you ever have
figured that out? Right. But people have written like odes. Like I remember I worked briefly for Gama Sutra. And I remember at that time that a guy in 2009 did an analysis of like the puzzle design in the series. And I remember like, his thoughts were just fascinating. And I remember thinking, maybe I'm just dumb. And like, I just don't understand, these puzzles, or I just don't see them in the way that, other people maybe see them. I don't know.
Yeah, but like, I view Myst as like, it just is a lockbox. And unless you buy the key, no one is solving these puzzles.
Really?
And you've identified perhaps my number one pet peeve in all of gaming. I don't think I've ever articulated it, but you just did, which is if you're working on something in a game, it could be a skill-based platforming thing, or it could be an actual puzzle, a wall, a blocker. And you are like, you know what? I don't have time for this. I'm going to look up the guide. And sometimes you're like, oh man, if I had put in 2 more hours, I would have gotten this. Okay, I don't feel guilty about the guide. I feel that's fine. I would have gotten there. And then there's some games where you look that up and you're like, there is no fucking way in the universe that I would have found this lever.
No.
And when I experience that, I'm like, what's the point of that? What is the point of designing something so obtuse that your player will never find it?
Well,
and I get angry about that, which is why I dislike Myst a lot.
Yeah. See, and that's so interesting, right? Because like this once again is just hearkening me back to that Gama Sutra article because I remember reading it with great interest. And I remember like the writer saying that like that, there of course are puzzles that are not good, right? They're terrible in Myst and Riven. And then there are puzzles that are so good that like they kind of model like how to construct like really like compelling intellectual challenge, right? And I remember thinking, well, that's really interesting. And once again, I was like, am I dumb? I'm dumb. But like really, like, I went back and really thought about it and I was like, actually, I think that I am not the kind of puzzles I like to solve are not the same as the puzzles that are in the Myst games. But like, for instance, my husband probably would love the puzzles of the games if he played them at that time. I'm not sure that he did, but because he has a certain type of puzzle solving like curiosity where he'll get like, oh, I'm going to figure this out, da 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 da, whereas like when I can't solve a puzzle and I'm just like racking my brain and I have no idea what to do, I'm not having fun anymore.
I'm exactly the same as you. And so I'm interested in the line or the spectrum of like, some puzzles are like, this is an impenetrable wall that only a genius who bashes away for 500 hours will crack the code. Yeah. And then there's puzzles that are like, that in games that are like, and then put the block here and put the block here and cross the bridge. Yeah, you did it. And you're like, wow, I'm great. I'm smart. But it's like, well, no, this was engineered to make you feel smart and accomplished. And then there's somewhere in the middle where a puzzle has a real intellectual challenge, but it's not a brick wall that you'll never overcome. There is a design element in there that allows you to slowly pick away at it. And when you do overcome it, you're like, wow, that was very hard, but I still did it and I didn't look up the guide. Right. And there is a very fine line between those things. And when you play a game with truly masterful puzzle design that you can overcome, but it still feels like a journey, that is magnificent. But those games occasionally 9 out of 10 puzzles are like, whoa, yeah, great. And then there's one puzzle that's like, I got nothing. Yeah. I am stuck. There's no way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like once again, I think it's a type of gamer thing. Like, some gamers presented with certain type of problems will just be happy as punch to just sit there and boggle and boggle and boggle over it till they figure out the solution. And then I think there's some gamers like us that are like, I'm impatient, number one, or maybe I'm not having fun puzzling over this, right? And like now, as an adult, I can look back and be like, oh, well, I wasn't dumb. This is just something that I personally did not enjoy doing.
That's it. Am I having fun puzzling this, or am I feeling frustrated puzzling this?
Right.
And
yeah.
That's a tightrope right there.
So, when I look back at Myst and I think about it now, I think extremely fondly of those worlds that I got to explore. And I still really appreciate that those worlds were something that felt so magic for me at that time. And I still listen to the music and love it, but I don't have to go back and replay the games. If I don't want to, I can literally just listen to the music and enjoy that.
That's a nice way.
Yeah. And like, I don't have to torture myself to go, oh, I just want to go back and figure out the puzzles. I don't enjoy that part of it that much. So why? I don't have to do that. So would that count? Would this really count within the umbrella of, games that don't hold up? I think what's interesting is that I feel like we've gone way off that original topic and we're almost kind of talking about our perspective of games from the past versus the future.
Well, that was exactly what I wanted to talk about. I think Does It Hold Up is kind of a placeholder title for a much deeper discussion that I was eager to have with you, even because you and I chatted a little bit about what we were going to talk about, and we had to stop ourselves because we knew that we would be going down this road. So throw the Does It Hold Up out the window a bit, because it's more about aspects of the design that work for us or work historically or work culturally or work or don't work on the continuum of this art form.
Right.
And it's nuanced and it's complicated and it's entirely subjective, as we have come to understand.
Yeah.
One that I have listed here, which really hits at everything we've already discussed, but maybe in a slightly different way. I put the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game, like arcade cabinet game. I'm hazy on when this, like the quote unquote release date of it, but I remember playing it as a kid. And I'll say this, it absolutely does hold up in amazing ways, because you're talking about a video game that came out contemporaneously with NES games. And this game, even if you play it today, looks spectacular. The animation, the fluidity, the cartoon graphics, it looks like a modern pixel art game. It's really stupendous and it controls well and it's fun to play. And the reason I reference it here and there is because I wanted to go back and play it. I emulated it, maybe even on my phone. And I was like, whoa, this is so good. It's so amazing. And then 10 minutes later, I was done with the game because the game is so punishing to suck quarters out of you.
Yes.
And the reason we played it over and over and over again and played it so much is because we probably never got past level 3, because you just play until your quarters run out and then you're done. And then you come back next weekend and play it again. So your memory of a game like this is like, wow, there's so much game here, but it's actually,
there really isn't a lot of game.
Nothing going on. It's because you just, on the emulator, you just hit continue and you're done with Shredder.
Right.
And so, does it hold up in that regard?
Not really.
In the format of an arcade game, yes, it is an artifact of its time. Does it hold up to modern sensibilities? No. It is existing in a different format now, which is why I am thrilled to see that there is a new Turtles game coming out in the style of the original arcade game. So it's not 3D, it's not Nickelodeon era Turtles. It is cartoon pixel, anime style Turtles, but hopefully with much more game to play. And I can't wait. I'm excited about that.
We've had 2 games on this list that we've been like, oh man, we wanted to go back and revisit it, but we learned this or that. But then we've gone, oh my God, they're going to make something new. And that's so exciting.
Yep.
Because that must mean that those developers too looked at what they made and went, we could do something today with this that would be even better. And I think
that's right. I don't know. I would be shocked if it was the same developers, because I think.
Oh, that's a good point.
I should check this.
Well, with Puzzle
I want to say Konami.
Oh yeah, maybe that's true. I don't know.
But Dotemu is at least publishing the new one. I think it's like an indie studio that's like, hey, we love this thing and we know so many people love it. What if we made the modern version of it? And they just got the license from Nickelodeon or whatever, whoever owns it now.
Wow.
And they seem to be doing right by it. And Turtles, man, were the biggest fucking thing in the universe.
They were.
And now they're not. And it's very interesting to me that they're not.
Yeah.
They should be back. And they didn't come back the way other nostalgic franchises came back,
Yeah.
I just find that interesting.
I still fantasize about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game that will probably never be actually made, that's based on the original comic book, that's dark as fuck. That is not child friendly at all. And let me tell you, if you ever had a bone of love in your body for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, do yourself a favor and look up that original comic that started this whole thing. It is nothing like the Turtles, It's badass.
I did not know there was a Dark Origin Turtles comic, but that jives perfectly with my, why doesn't this exist game, which is, get ready, because I think you're gonna jive on this. It's an Arkham / Shadow of Mordor style Turtles game. where it's open world. It is like tactical is the wrong word. Timing based moves. It's not like oh my god, white knuckle action. It's like, okay, press this now, perfectly timed sequence, and then you're flipping guys and you're chopping guys and you're throwing guys, but you're in a dark city. And why doesn't that battle system exist in a Turtles game? They did make a 3D Turtles game and it got pulled or something. It got like discontinued or something was wrong with it, and they took it off shelves and they removed it from Steam. I never played it. It's a mystery to me what happened there, but like, this is a no-brainer. Arkham Turtles, why doesn't this happen?
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, no, definitely it's worth digging up to see what it was like. And this is not to say that the comic version of the Turtles is not great, because quite honestly, I think it is. And I enjoyed that very much as a child and young adult too. But I think, yeah, it's really worth just going to see that and just, kind of check out how gritty it was originally.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I listened to some other podcast, it might have been Retronauts actually, where they did a really deep dive on Turtles, and it was like failed comic book artists who couldn't catch a break. All their ideas were like not so great, and they were just like, who fucking cares? What if it's just like fucking mutated turtles and they're ninjas? Like, whatever, man. And then biggest cultural phenomenon of the 80s, you could argue.
Right. And they were just like, I give the fuck up. Like, I don't even know what else to do. Let's just do this and this. And people are like, yes. And you're like, wait, what? Comics,
games, TV show, movies, lunchboxes, everything you could imagine was Turtles. And so knowing that the original vision was dark.
So dark
is rad.
Yeah, so dark. Super, super. I really read some awesome comics because I would always get really interested in origins. Like when I saw The Crow, I was obsessed with The Crow because I was 16 and tortured and goth. And I was like, I want to read the comic. And like, I mean, The Crow's dark anyway, but like, oh my God, the comic's so much darker and I love it. Like,
nice.
There was a lot of darkness in comics those days. So anyway.
What else is on your list? You have a game here that I also have limited
knowledge of,
limited experience with.
Well, so back before Square Enix merged, there was a company called Squaresoft. And Squaresoft Squaresoft put every Final Fantasy out before Final Fantasy X. Or everything 10 before, right? And I maintain Square was my absolute favorite developer up until it became Square Enix. And I really desperately I desperately wanted to continue to love them, but it was just not the same company after that I loved. So that said, Parasite Eve was I guess you would call it like survival horror. Yeah, I guess it would be like survival horror. Anyway, it was made in 1998, and it was developed as a sequel to an excellent novel that I absolutely love. The gist is the story is told from the perspective of a cop named Aya Bray, and it's told over a 6-day period, and she's attempting to stop a woman named Eve, who is, I mean, she's a bad guy, I guess you could say, but like, I'm not really sure how to explain beyond like non-human what's going on. They definitely like kind of sort of not dumbed down, but like they had to make this story like digestible, I guess. But so basically there's a lot of stuff about like the cellular structure of the body and like mitochondria and like the thing like this creature was like transforming people's cellular structure from the inside, which I found to be incredibly fascinating in 1997. It was also Squaresoft's first M-rated game ever released, which I thought was really, really cool.
What platform is this?
This was on PS1.
PS1.
But yeah, so basically like, you move through Manhattan, you fought enemies, but like to me, right, like the story was really fascinating because I hadn't read the book, but then I went and read the book after that. And the best way that I can kind of explain it is that it was fascinating to me to think about, I guess, like a survival horror game that had like a science rooted kind of like timeline in it. An interesting side fact about that is that if you ever read the novel The Ring, which of course, was made into the classic Ring film, that novel also really gets into, not that you have a curse from a person who was killed in a fit of rage or whatever, but that the curse actually had a organic origin where it bloomed inside the cells of your body. So both of these stories had like kind of similar, just fascinating stories, right?
Biological horror. P.S. That's what viruses do. So
right.
This is real. I mean, it's fiction. It's science fiction, but it is. We are and should be afraid of things changing our DNA and our cells because that happens.
Right. And it's just so interesting. Like in the beginning of the game, for instance, like, you're this cop and you're attending like an opera that's being held at Carnegie Hall. And during the opera, everyone in the entire building spontaneously combusts except for you and your date and an actress on stage. It's like, holy shit, who would not want to play a game that like that was the opening? You're like, what the fuck is happening? So anyway, I was incredibly fascinated by this. So I kind of think of it as like Resident Evil ended up moving in the direction where like it started to talk about like bioorganic, like, like it got into that, right? Into the inner workings of the body and kind of body horror stuff. And I think that Parasite Eve could have been a massively successful franchise if it had continued in that direction, but for whatever reason, it just didn't quite resonate. And it's such a shame because I love that game. I love the soundtrack. It was by Yoko Shimomura, who a lot of people know for like the other music that they've done. And it really had this great, memory for me, right? Obviously. But like I've tried to go back and play Parasite Eve. And number one, number one, PlayStation 1 games on the whole for me are like, I can barely go back. They hurt my eyes so bad. So bad. And this is sad, right? Because it's like, I have the most amazing memories of this game, but I just don't know. I don't think I can go back and deal with how fucking ugly it is.
Yep.
So anyway, that's my whole Parasite Eve rant. I really wish someone would remake it. I really doubt it. It just doesn't seem like a game that would be remade or resurrected, and that's sad. But
isn't it so interesting that there's a period of time where the medium looks, I hate to use the word objectively, but like I would say 9 out of 10 dentists would agree, objectively bad. A time period where games look bad. But like you can watch movies from the 80s or the 50s or the 70s, and some of them are bad, but some of them are beautiful in their own way, even if they look old. And it's I don't know. It's just very interesting that technologically there was a gap there where we were making the leap from 2D to 3D, and that leap was there were a couple stumbles there, perhaps, necessary ones. It's not no shade. That's just the technological progress.
Right.
Slow.
No, I totally agree with that. And it's weird. It's just but I tell you what, I know people who can go back and play PS1 games, no problem. Like they don't mind the graphical things that bother me at all. So I totally maintain, I'm never going to be like, oh my God, all PS1 games are trash. Like, no, man, there's great games in there. I really wish I could go back and play them, but I cannot do it. So, although someone very recently was like, were you going to play Silent Hill 1 since you just played Silent Hill 2? And I was like, shit, I don't know, because I think I might just suffer. But then another part of me is like, but maybe, I don't know.
There might be entertainment value in streaming it, of like watching you play it and then you also saying, wow, this game is really important and look what it's doing here. But wow, that's a face or that's a polygon, or, that there is like playing it for your own enjoyment, not so much playing it for the benefit of others has value, perhaps more value.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, as I have this conversation with you, I'm kind of like, I should at least try and see what happens. Like, because as we're revisiting, these topics, I'm like, man, God, that was an amazing game. Like, maybe it's worth it to, let my eyes bleed for the first hour and just like see what happens after that. So it's making me curious. It made me question my own assumptions,
Adjacent note, I'm really quite enamored with the idea that like we look back at pixel art games and now, while those graphics seemed rudimentary, they have obviously come into fashion again, and we love them from nostalgia. But we also look at pixel art of like there is objectively beautiful things that have come before and that artists are doing now, and so these games are beautiful. But there has not been a lot of PS1 N64 era polygonal throwback aesthetic, but it is starting to happen. And
really?
Valheim, which took the world by storm and continues to be a juggernaut. And again, I've said it on the show. It's my perfect game. I wish I could play Valheim. It still, despite numerous updates, just is running not well on my machine. And I have a pretty good computer. That aside, the aesthetic of Valheim is extremely PS1, early PS2, polygonal, chunky, whatever, but with modern lighting. And the textures are also quite low res. But there is something about putting that aesthetic in a modern engine and then putting the right lighting, and obviously the game mechanics are really there's a lot of hook there, and you put it all together and it's like it feels like it has a feeling like a PS1 era game, but you step back and say, but it's gorgeous. It is objectively a stunning game. But then you walk up to a tree and you're like, oh, this bark looks like it's from 1997. Like, it's quite well done. I've never seen it done so well, merging the modern with that weird historical gap in the polygonal record, so to speak.
Just a second ago, I had opened up the comments that some of our listeners had posted on Twitter when I said we were going to talk about this, and I noticed that Megalith wrote that his experience was with Peggle, and he said like he loved it so much when it was new, but it wasn't like for now when he goes back, it's not fun anymore. And what's worse is that he couldn't put his finger on exactly why. And I was like, that's how I feel about Puzzle Quest.
Yes.
Like, I don't understand, but through this conversation, I'm pretty much like, well, I guess it's because I changed, because the game didn't change. The game's still there. It's exactly what it was before.
Changed. Games changed, the world changed. There are lots of variables here that make it hard to know why. What is Peggle? I don't think I have an image or a concept in my mind at all for Peggle.
Peggle is a game that was made by PopCap, who made a ton of just fantastically bright, happy, just silly, basic fun kind of games, right? Like they were puzzles and they were interesting to play, but they were never like you never feel frustrated by a PopCap game, at least not in my opinion.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. And so I really enjoyed Peggle 2. Maybe what's the best way for me to describe what Peggle is? The board is like all these little it's inspired by Pachinko. So basically like each level of Peggle, you get like a field of like colored like spears, and like you have to clear them out while by shooting a ball at them, and it will bounce all over the board. So your goal is that you have to figure out exactly what to bounce your balls off of to hit a certain number of things you need to check off. And the game, one of the things I love the most about this game is it is absolutely unapologetically ridiculous. So the sorry, my brain's not coming up with the word. The animation that you get when you finish a Peggle level, I highly encourage that you just Google like Peggle end of level or something and just watch what happens. It is insane.
Because it's probably very satisfying and colorful and
but it's also so ridiculous that you're laughing. Like when I finished it, like when I would finish a level, it would not only be like the rush of serotonin you get from like, oh, I did it. It would also be like you're cracking up laughing because there's this like ridiculously colorful uniform and it's just goofy. And now I want to go back and play it. And I'm sure I'd go back and play it and then be like, this isn't good anymore. And then I'd be sad.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is a question for you, and maybe also for Megalith, who contributed this this title. When you said PopCap, maybe I'm wrong about the timelines here, but in the way that you and I grew up renting a lot of bullshit from Blockbuster and thinking, wow, games are cool, but in actuality, 9 out of 10 of those games were total trash. There is now a generation coming up after us that grew up on Zynga and PopCap games, most of which probably aren't great, but they filled the time, the downtime, the dumb time, the brainless time that we all had and needed when we were kids. And that's not, there's nothing to analyze there. It's just the march of time, but it is very interesting to think about those time wasters on different platforms, on phones, in web browsers and things of that sort.
And it's funny, right? I think like some gamers might be like, oh, like you're not a real gamer if you play Peggle 2. And it's like, I kind of disagree. I think there is no definition of a quote unquote real gamer in reality. I think that's just fucking gatekeeping. But like, you know, I feel like there is a place for a game that is kind of like what I guess I would call mindless fun. You know, the same way that maybe you might want to just go to the movies this summer and see a blockbuster movie that's just full of action and shooting and, you know, whatever, car chases. And it's just like, you're not going to have a deep experience playing this, but you're probably going to be amused for a few hours. And that's kind of how I feel about games like Peggle, you know, very simple, but still enjoyable. So is Bejeweled. I mean, Bejeweled is like one of the most played games.
Of course.
Yeah. Crazy.
I 100% agree with you, but I would like to also add the idea that, like, first of all, I hate the word gamer. I truly despise it for a lot of reasons. But I think the term game or movie or whatever can sometimes be too big an umbrella. And by that, I mean, yes, Bejeweled and Civilization are both video games, but the person who plays Civilization is a different who plays 400 hours of Civilization is a different person than the person who plays 400 hours of Bejeweled. I'm not making a judgment about which one is better at all. I'm just saying those are different, in the same way that if you use the term, if you said, I'm a film aficionado, or I love literature. And then you proceeded to say, I love literature and my favorite book is, I don't know, Twilight or something. And forgive me, anyone who, you know, I'm sure Twilight is wonderful. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there is stuff that is just fun, silly, escapist entertainment. And then there is, this is so elitist to say, but there is more sophisticated art in any genre. So to be a film buff and also say that, you know, what Fast and Furious or whatever, I don't know. I've never seen them. I'm sure they're great films. They're different. And so I'm not saying that I'm a real gamer and you're not a real gamer. I reject that, but I think we need better language to talk about what kind of video game enthusiasts we are, because I am not the same as the Bejeweled lover. And that's not saying, I'm not saying I'm better. I'm saying those are different forms of the medium.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I totally agree. And yeah, like I think it's really easy because people seem to get like so much out of like kind of trying to judge. I think that's what gatekeeping is all about. It's so easy to look at a person that loves like Farmville or loved Farmville when it was big. I don't know, that's probably old. But like, games like that, it's really easy to like scoff at those people and be like, "Oh, they're not gamers." And it's like, yeah, I agree. The word gamer is shit. It's definitely different types of gamers embracing different types of games. But I also feel like at this point, there's more gamers in the world than there ever have been before, whether their game is Farmville or, Final Fantasy, 15. Like it doesn't matter to me. Yes, we're all different thinkers. But for me personally, as a person that felt profoundly lonely in gaming as a teenager.
You said that.
Yeah. I personally love the fact that I can probably relate with some form of game to most people. Like if someone's like, "Oh my God, I can't stop playing this dragon egg breeding game." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen that one. Show it to me." Phone games can be so fun sometimes. Like I can relate to people about that, and
because there's a mechanic in that dumb phone game that you will instantly recognize as a loop that you love from some other system or game that is perhaps more sophisticated than the Dragon Egg game, but you can still see it and relate to it.
Absolutely. And also for me, it's just nice rather than to kind of be, the alien in the room that was like, "Oh, I play video games," and people are like, "Oh my God, what's the matter with you?" To be at a point where really most adults play some form of game.
Right.
And I like that.
You know what I love about that also is relating to kids. And not so much in the past year, but when my kids have classmates or like nieces and nephews or whatever, and you're like, "So, like, hey, what are you playing?" And they're like, "Oh, like I really like Minecraft." And I can say like, "I love Minecraft. What are you building?" And they're like, they look at you like, "You like Minecraft? Like, how could a grown up like this game?" And it becomes a touch point, and I do enjoy that. It's nice.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that's pretty cool. And I have two nieces that like games. One of them is definitely like the kind of gamer I am, in that I can see her like complete absorption into these worlds. And I'm like, "Oh, look, there's a little me." But like, yeah, it's always been nice for them, to go over to my sister-in-law's house and be like, "Oh, like what are you guys playing on your Switches?" And they'll come show me and we'll talk about it. At one point, they were playing Animal Crossing when my husband and I were, so we went to each other's towns a few times. That was super cool.
Best. I love that.
I know. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Seeing my daughter, who is very creative, come to life digitally inside of Animal Crossing, where a kid designing their house in the early days of Animal Crossing is the dumbest shit ever. And then as we acquired more items and she got more familiar with the systems and she got a little older, she was designing patterns, very sophisticated patterns, and then color coordinating them with themes. It wasn't just dumping a bunch of random shit into a room. She's like, "This is my ocean room, and this is my teddy bear playroom, and this is my music room," or whatever. And it's like, yes, seeing her go all the way into the world was really, really fun and exciting and special to me, and also to my wife, who, as I mentioned on the show, like really does not spend a lot of time in games, but really got hooked on Animal Crossing, and we did it together as a family. It was really, really special.
Yeah.
In a year when that was pretty garbage. We share some of these other suggestions from listeners, because I'm going to be out of time shortly, but I do want to get to these.
Yeah, for sure. So Ian Hall says, "I love the SNES JRPGs, Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI, Breath of Fire 2 in particular, but I no longer have the patience and time for the constant battling that slows down the pace. I would pay good money to have a non-emulated version with a speed up function. See Final Fantasy VII re-release on Switch." I think that I hope that any game developer is listening to this and hears how much so many fans want that, because I really think that it's like, hey, do you like money? Would you like money? Like if you'd like to make a whole bunch of money, just give us these options, because we want to remember the great parts of the experience. But like, yeah, we literally don't have the time to sit around like that anymore. We are adults now.
I want to share these games with my kids also, and that you just cannot.
No.
You can't do it.
No.
Without being able to fast forward.
If you don't have patience, your kids are not going to have patience.
No.
And honestly, who can blame them? Because we just don't. Like, I remember trying to go back to play, I think it was Phantasy Star 2, which is a game that I have super, I loved it. It was the first time I ever saw a sci-fi RPG, and I was amazed by that. Yeah. But if you go back and try to play it, you can take about 4 to 5 steps before you get into another random battle. That is some bullshit.
That hurts.
Yeah,
that hurts.
It hurts.
Yeah.
So no,
Final
none
Fantasy
of that.
VI is if I had to make the list of top 5, top 10 games that are most meaningful to me, and I think we should do that for this show.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy VI is on there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not egregious the way you just described, but it is a Final Fantasy game from the 90s. So it has all that. And in my replays of it, I have emulated and fasted forwarded. And it was great to do that in that context. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, and I think a lot of developers have definitely, and publishers have taken this on, to look at these games and say, we have these great properties. What can we do to make them more playable for the gamer of today? I think that is an incredibly clever thing for all these companies to be doing.
What though? It's dangerous because when they remake those games, they change the graphics. They make them mobile friendly. They put little chibi graphics in there instead of the originals, and because there are versions of Final Fantasy whatevers on the app stores, and no thank you.
Yeah.
They do not look and sound like the original games that I want to play. So
I did not care. I just don't care for playing with my phone with that type of game.
Sure.
But I remember I did play chibi versions of the remakes that were on, I believe, the 3D, either DS Lite or 3DS. Not sure what year was the right era there, but I really enjoyed those. So that was a way that they reinvented it, and I'm sure they'll reinvent it again in some other way. But yeah, I'm not a person who enjoys playing games on my phone in that way. Not those games. I need a controller.
Yep.
So anyway, we have one more question comment from Alex. And he says, I used to love No More Heroes 1 and 2 in the late 2010s, and I'm planning on replaying them both before the launch of No More Heroes 3 this year, but I'm deathly afraid they won't hold up. What I thought was edgy humor back then may end up being very cringy as a 33-year-old man. And what I have to say to that is, oh my God, if you want to cringe your face off of your body, get out your PlayStation 1 and play a game called Gex. Gex. Gex,
yeah.
Enter the Gecko, was a Crystal Dynamics game where I don't know if you remember it, but
no, I never did PlayStation, but I see the image and I don't know it to be cringy, but I'm eager to learn.
Well, so it was the first in a series, and what it was that it's a kind of platformy adventure game, and they got a comedian to be the voice of Gex. Okay. His name is Dana Gold. And at the time, it was wow, this is so fun. I don't know how old I was, but at that time I was oh my God, this is so funny. I thought it was hilarious and I couldn't get enough of it. I think I might have been talking about games and somehow Gex came up a few years ago. And I was I'm going to pull up a video on YouTube. Holy fuck. It is I could have literally cringed so hard that I would have sunk to the center of the earth. And I was you know what? Gex is obviously not a legendary title like a No More Heroes is, but
yeah, okay.
I totally hear you, Alex. That feeling of oh my God, what if it's not good when I go back to it? If you've listened to the whole show up to this point, I think maybe it's less about, they won't hold up or they're not good, and more about we've changed and the things we want have changed. And maybe that just means that you get to live a brand new No More Heroes 3 that is everything that you loved and more. And that's kind of what I hope for, Puzzle Quest 3 for myself, or, whatever else. It's yeah, you can definitely have that moment of, oh my God, it's not what it used to be. But if we're lucky enough to have those franchises revived in new versions, I think that gives us a lot to look forward to.
Yes. And also, this is making me think of another aspect, which we didn't get into too deeply, but that culture changes. And so, what Alex is talking about, edgy humor. And I see this a lot. I feel this a lot with TV and movies, where you're watching an older sitcom or movie or whatever, and and something, a character says something, and you're like, oh, we don't say that kind of thing about women anymore.
Yeah, no.
And it's like, this is not that old. This piece of media is not that old, but you immediately are like, oh my god, no, this does not hold up in a post Me Too, post BLM world. And it is very disorienting to see that. And when the way you were, I don't know about Gex. I don't know if I don't know about No More Heroes. I don't know if any of it would fall into those categories. But when you talk about like an edgy comedian is like voicing the character, and No More Heroes sounds like it has humor of its era, I would wonder if you could go back and play those and be like, oh no, we don't say those words anymore.
And I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like impossible to not, just because of the natural way that the world works. It's impossible as we evolve not to go back and be like, oh dear. No, no, we don't call them Orientals anymore, sir. I'm so sorry.
Sir.
That is not okay.
Yeah. Well, progress. We salute you.
Yes.
Glad we've made it, at least as far as we have. More work to do, of course.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yes.
I was looking forward to this conversation, and it paid off.
Yes, it has been very fun. I will say that as we get off and I go to grab myself some dinner, I am most probably going to spend a long period of time tonight watching Parasite Eve 1 videos, because that is all I can think about now.
If you can make it.
I don't think I can make it, but like, quite honestly, I just want to watch. I just want to watch how cool that game has. The coolest like opening like 20 minutes in my mind. Like, yeah. Anyway, I can't wait. I have to go watch it.
But sometimes that's all you need. We've talked about it. You just watching, reminiscing, and saying, like you said, listening to the music from Myst, which I have no nostalgia for Myst. But now, when you said that, I am thinking about, hey, I would like to understand what this music was of its time, and listen to it, maybe enjoy it, put it on in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good background music. It's, the cool thing about Myst was that you were alone, right? You were almost always completely alone. So it very much made up for this like solo kind of experience you had. So yeah, they're on Spotify. Try it.
Oh, all right. Officially. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to everyone who shared their nostalgic worries, let's call them. That was wonderful. And, as we've said many times, this show is not just us chatting. It is a conversation with you. So if you are listening on a regular basis, number one, thank you for joining us. We deeply, deeply appreciate it, and we love hearing from you. So be sure to tweet with us, who hopefully will ask more of these kinds of questions in the future. And we have our email address, which is haveenteredthechat@gmail.com. Our Twitters, that email will, of course, always be in every episode's show notes, so no need to write it down. Get at us. Tell us what you are going back to, what you are afraid to go back to, what you went back to and said, yeah, this is the masterpiece I remember. It is the Shakespeare of games. Let us know. And thank you, as always, for chatting with us. Our theme music is by Azure Flux. Our logo is illustrated by Just Call Me Katerina. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating or review on the podcast platform of your choice. Because if people stumble upon it and they see that it has lots of stars and lots of audience comments, people are more inclined to listen. That is science, I am told, by the podcast gods. So please help us out. Share it with a friend or two. Thank you for chatting, and we will talk with you next time.